Each side presented opening statements yesterday, and the first witnesses took the stand, describing a chaotic scene on the Rust set after the fatal shooting. Mola Lengi is at the courthouse in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Good morning, Mola.
Well, good morning, George. Yeah, the prosecution calling their first witnesses to testify, but not before both the state and the defense, giving us a window into how they plan to argue this case.
Alec Baldwin appearing on the verge of tears in the Santa Fe courtroom where his criminal trial kicked off Wednesday. His wife, Ilaria, seen comforting Baldwin, his siblings behind him, and at times visibly emotional.
State of New Mexico versus Alexander Ray Baldwin.
Prosecutors and Baldwin's defense attorneys carefully laying out their cases as to whether Baldwin should be held responsible for the 2021 fatal shooting on the set of Rust, after a prop gun Baldwin was rehearsing with fired a live round, killing cinematographer Helena Hutchins and wounding director Joel Souza.
Out at Bonanza Creek Ranch right now, we've had 2 people shot on a movie set accidentally.
The state claiming the actor repeatedly violated firearm safety standards on set and adamant that Baldwin pulled the trigger.
The evidence will show that someone who played make-believe with a real gun and violated the cardinal rules of firearm safety is the defendant, Alexander Baldwin.
You will see him cock the hammer when he's not supposed to cock the hammer. You will see him put his finger on the trigger when his finger's not supposed to be on the trigger.
But his defense attorneys arguing the issue of the trigger is irrelevant and that a live round should never have made its way onto the film set.
Even if he intentionally pulled the trigger like the prosecutor just demonstrated, that doesn't make him guilty of homicide. He did not know or have any reason to know that gun was loaded with a live bullet.
Baldwin's attorney showing jurors this video of him rehearsing the scene earlier that day before Hutchins was shot, and saying it was the responsibility of armorer Hannah Gutierrez and assistant director David Halls to ensure that the gun was safe.
The gun was double-checked, verified it was a cold gun, not an actor's responsibility to check. Safety was ensured before. Alec was doing his practicing, his rehearsing, his movements.
Jurors seeing that firearm up close as it was entered into evidence.
It's the gun that Hannah Gutierrez, the armorer, handed to me.
As first responders testified they arrived to a chaotic scene, also admitting some mistakes were made in the handling of key evidence and witnesses.
You made some mistakes at this scene, right?
Yes.
And that you've learned since then about some of these mistakes, right?
Yes.
Well, if convicted, Baldwin faces up to 18 months in prison. This morning, we expect to continue to hear from the state's witnesses. Tomorrow, the prosecution is expected to call Hannah Gutierrez to testify, and we're told, guys, that she will plead the fifth.
Okay, Mola, thanks very much. Let's bring in our chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams. Dan, thanks for coming in this morning. Either side have the edge in opening statements?
Well, you know, what struck me is how much they agree on, right? Alec Baldwin fired the weapon. We agree. Alec Baldwin fired the weapon, and it was a mistake. They agree on that as well. It wasn't Alec Baldwin's responsibility for how that live round got on the set. Okay, all of that is agreed. Now the question is, what is Alec Baldwin, or more broadly, an actor's responsibility when it comes to ensuring that a weapon on the set is safe? That's the area where they disagree. So it's almost like it's like a battle of the experts here as to what they disagree on, as opposed to the majority of the facts here, which they agree on.
You know, but the defense team seemed to be backing away from something that Alex told George, that he didn't pull the trigger. So they're backing away from that, and they're trying to say if he pulls the trigger on a movie set, that it's not illegal. It's
right.
Nothing wrong. That argument, are you surprised by that?
No, because it's exactly this point, right, about what is the obligation of the actor. Why add another burden to their case from the defense perspective, right? Yeah. Why allow the prosecution to be able to say, we can show he pulled the trigger? The defense's perspective is, okay, let's assume you can show that he pulled the trigger. That shouldn't determine what the outcome of this case ought to be, and that's why a number of people think that he shouldn't have done that interview with George, because he made that comment, which has now come back to haunt him.
They're trying to say if you pull on a movie set, it's...
Exactly,
okay.
Exactly. It's not his legal, particularly criminal responsibility for something like that.
Baldwin's lawyers are restricted here, though. They can't cite the prosecution's arguments in the Hannah Gutierrez trial. How big of a blow is that?
Well, remember, you know, they argued something slightly different, right? In that case, they're trying to show she's largely responsible, right? It's her fault. And yes, Alec Baldwin was a problem too. Now they're doing the opposite, which is to say it's his fault, and yes, she was a problem too.
One final question.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't the fact that he was told there was no live rounds in the gun end the conversation?
Because the prosecutors would argue that doesn't alleviate him of his legal responsibility to check the weapon for safety. Meaning, if we weren't on a movie set, right, no doubt the obligation would be on Alec Baldwin. And that comes back to the first thing we talked about. What is the obligation of an actor in this context?
Completely changes Hollywood in a lot of cases.
Absolutely.
With this decision. All right, Dan, thank you.